giving me the chance to interview you. So
My
I'll,
pleasure.
I'll introduce myself again. My name is Louisa Amoa. Um, I'll say almost I'm close to getting my bachelor's. I like to say that so I get motivated because if I don't, I don't. So this interview is an informational interview for school, just to know more about the field I am trying to get into. And I looked on your site and I realized that you treat a lot of depression people. I want to get into depression. I mainly want to do drug addiction, but I also want to do mental health as well, not just addiction. I want to go into anxiety, depression, and the other things. So um, I would like to ask a few questions if it's okay with you. So, my first question is, what is your educational and professional background, and what kind of background does one need to get into psychology?
Okay, so for purposes of also the recording, my name's Mandy Young. So I have been qualified as a psychotherapist for over 30 years now. My qualification began at the University of Cape Town in 1975. A long time
Oh,
ago. So I originally did, when I was at the University of Cape Town, I went up did a bachelor's degree. I did a psychology honors degree, social work honors degree. And very interestingly, at the time, we were in the midst of a very big social political movement, in that the apartheid system in South Africa had been well entrenched, and the younger people were saying this is enough. So there were a lot of bus boycotts, school boycotts. And in my final year for my social work honors degree, I was doing community social work. So I was very involved with what was going on. And I was actually from Zimbabwe, studying in Cape Town. So my parents were often a little bit concerned I would be promptly shipped home. But it really gave me a great insight into what it is to be community, what it is for a whole community to be, the youth anyway, motivated together to make a transformational social change. And obviously, I believe in the equality of all people. I don't believe in division based on the color of your skin. Having grown up in Zimbabwe, where we were racially integrated and we had friends of all races, this was foreign to me. So I was very much standing against it. So that was where my social work degree began. I then actually, I had government bursaries from Zimbabwe. So I went back and practiced as a social worker in a municipal, not a municipal setting, I guess you would call it a municipal setting here, or a government office. So my experience was quite diverse. I was really, really privileged to have had an amazing mentor, which is a really, really important thing as you are growing in your career. Having a mentor who has many more years of experience. She was a lovely lady. She was very well connected with all the resources in the area. So she was a great support, not only emotionally and with her experience, but also with her network. So at that time, I went from dealing with drug addiction to working with children in a children's home to having to represent youth in court. So it was a very diverse experience for me. I then got married and moved to a government office in another town in Zimbabwe called Bulawayo. And then after that, my former husband was transferred to England. So in England, my experience was very different. I worked for a group called Samaritans, which was people mostly dealing with something what you're dealing with, depression, and wanting to commit suicide. And I worked with a lot of what they call yobos, people with funny hairstyles and rings in their ears and their noses, in
Yeah.
a Christian coffee shop.
Okay.
So that was also, and unfortunately in England, my South African credentials weren't accepted for racial reasons and for political reasons. And then I had children and came back and didn't work for a while. Then I went back to university and I did my psychology honors via a online online organization called UNISA, and then progressed from there to go back to the University of Cape Town, where I did some lecturing and tutoring, and I did my master's degree. And the focus of my master's degree was very relevant to the reality of my life at the time. The reality of my life at the time is my marriage had fallen apart. I had two children who were 5 and 8, and I was really concerned that I was the kind of parent that could support them through this life transition. So the focus of my master's thesis was a pre, post, and follow-up ecosystemic assessment of a divorce adjustment program for children in middle childhood. So it was a program that had been well researched in the United States for 15 years with very good outcomes, and I introduced it into South Africa. I was the only person, and it was called Hurt to Hope Divorce Adjustment Program. And I looked at that from the parenting perspective, the children in the groups, group dynamics, boys versus girls, all sorts of things. So it was a very broad project, a thesis. And from there, what happened next? I think my private practice grew from there. So I have had a private practice in Cape Town before we came to Sicily for over 30 years, and dealing a lot in divorce-related matters, dealing with depression, I used to do mostly long-term work, not crisis intervention work. So taking a long journey, working with people for real transformation. So often I worked with people twice a week, sometimes for up to 9 years with the same person. Because I believe if you're going to intervene as a psychotherapist, make a difference. Don't just tickle the surface, make a real difference. So that was my kind of motto. I worked with two different medical teams. One medical team was helping cancer patients. So I was the counselor working together with cancer patients receiving a very progressive treatment and with their families. That was very emotionally challenging. You know, I sometimes, when I saw somebody die in front of me and dealt with the grief of the family, I would drive home from work crying all the way home. So that was very emotional. And then I also worked with the medical team dealing with amputees who had lost a limb. So again, very traumatic work. You know, it's quite a thing when you lose a limb that can never ever be replaced again, and how do you rehabilitate back into life? And then 25 years ago, Howard Kleinbell wrote a book called Healing Yourself, Healing the World. And he said that psychological theories are like ripples on a pond. They build upon and emanate from one another. So you might start with Freud, and then you'll get Winnicott, and then you'll get Rogers and client-centered, and they kind of take from each other, but grow a little bit further. And for me, the most outer ring of my experience has been to go into nature. So I feel like we have looked at our interaction between ourselves as people, but we've forgotten about the earth that actually sustains us, and the interaction with nature that actually is very stimulating actually to all our senses. For me, it's a place when you go into nature, you relax. It's a system that's been tried and tested over time. For me, it's a place where you really meet God, and his unconditional love, because it doesn't matter whether you fat, thin, educated, uneducated. As soon as you get into nature, you just accept it for who you are. And tribal people and wild animals are amazing at their adaptation to the environment and how they work as team. So for me, some of the principles and ways in which they did that very much supported my Christian understandings of how community, family should work. So I guess that is a very long answer to your first question.
It was interesting hearing about, yeah. It was interesting. Okay. My next question will be, what sparked your interest in psychotherapy?
I think, like you, I wanted to deal with addiction, with people who were trapped in their lifestyle and didn't know how to get out of it. And I wanted to be able to see them liberated. I wanted to see them healed.
So, what does a typical day entail for a psychotherapist?
Wow. Now or before I came to Sicily?
It doesn't matter. You can explain whichever one.
Okay, so maybe I go back to when I was functioning more fully.
Okay.
So a typical day could be seeing a minimum of 5 clients a day for an hour. It could also incorporate team meetings if I was at the hospital. And it could also involve group meetings. I used to do a lot of group meetings with the amputees that I worked together with, because they were all in the same boat. So it made them feel more normal to be able to be involved in group work. Also did group work with the children who I was helping to adjust to their parents' divorce. Also did parenting groups, because parents who are now divorced or single parents often have to need more advanced parenting skills, because they often carry a double role. You know, they're working and they're having to be a parent. And so they needed more advanced parenting skills, especially to deal with the emotional needs of the children. So it could involve any combination of individual, teamwork, hospital meetings.
Thank you. I'm taking some notes. So if you see me looking down, I'm just taking.
No, that's fine. And I'll send you the recording afterwards. So if you need to catch up on anything, you can.
What do you like most about your career?
I think what I've loved most about my career is often when you choose this career, you are often a wounded healer. So often you come with your own need for healing. So I've really appreciated this journey, because not only have I had to be in supervision myself, so I don't contaminate my clients with my own issues, which has been a very growing thing for me. You also tend to have the clients coming towards you that are going to stimulate the most healing in yourself. So it's quite interesting how you draw those kind of clients towards yourself on a very unconscious kind of level. So what I've loved is the growth within myself. And what I like about the growth within myself is that then I have greater capacity to give to other people. And I've liked the absolutely amazing privilege of taking a long journey with people and seeing real life transformations. So if I gave an example of 2 that would immediately come to mind, the person that I last worked with before I came to Cape Town, I worked with her for 3 years. When we started, she wanted to leave her marriage. She had an alcohol addiction and she wasn't working. She was a lovely lady. During her time in our work together, because I said to her, sort yourself out before you make any decisions about your marriage. So she actually grew very much within herself. She's still married. She's built up a business, a really big business. She became a Christian, and she's just in a very different place in her life. So just beautiful to take a walk with somebody down that road. And then if I talk about my taking people into wilderness places, so the focus in the wilderness places is to increase emotional and ecological intelligence. So good mental health and environmental sustainability go hand in hand. So an example of that would be a divorced lady who came on a 5-day, 4-night wilderness encounter called The Wisdom of Elephants. And after spending 4 days on a safari with group discussions afterwards, she made a decision. She'd come out of a really messy divorce. She was really unhappy. She was overweight. She made a decision to downscale from a house to a flat where her and her 10-year-old daughter would live, and to do something she always had a passion for, which was, strangely enough, to fly a small light aircraft. And a year later, she phoned me. She was on her second pilot's lesson. She had lost weight. She had sold her house and bought a flat. And now she flies for the Batteliers, which is a conservation group. So it was a lovely example of how emotional healing can happen quite powerfully in a wilderness place and really transform somebody's life, so that they not only heal within themselves and their human relationships, but they also are more earth caring and contributing towards the care of the earth.
That was really great. That's really great. You're doing really great work.
Thanks.
What are some challenges you face in this career choice?
The biggest challenge, I guess, for me has been when I've been working with children and I haven't been able to act more powerfully in the situation, and I knew they were getting abused. That is when I had sleepless nights. But other than that, I think I've loved all of it, because, you know, if you're working together with people who are motivated to change their lives, it's not your responsibility whether they do it or they don't. All you can do is give them the support, the insight, the caring that will bridge them moving from where they are to where they want to be. So yeah, I've really loved every aspect of the work that I've done, except for that one thing. that one thing, that always gave me sleepless nights. You know, like if you knew a child was being in an incestuous situation, and, you know, it was being guarded by various members of the family because they didn't want to, you know, and you knew it was going on because you knew from the play therapy you were doing with the child, this has to be happening. And not being able to do something quickly enough. Oh, that was terrible.
Oh, okay. I'll go off my questions a little bit just because of what you just said. Because, you know, as an African, I understand where you're coming from, and I could only assume that happened when you were in Cape Town.
Yes.
So, as a person, right now, I would love to open a counseling in Africa that's in the near future. So, how did you handle it later on? I know it must have bothered you not to, you know, act quickly, but how did you go about it? Because I know in Africa, these things could, you know, parents want to leave these things alone. They don't want to report it.
Sure.
They just want it to stay in the family. How do you deal with such a thing?
Sometimes I couldn't do anything. Sometimes my hands were tied and I just knew there was nothing I could do. And I would pray. I would pray for the protection of that child. I would pray that God would somehow break through and intervene. On other occasions, I could involve the government authorities, so the child welfare, to go around and check. And often when I was called into court cases to write a report, you know, I was very, I think what you have to do when you are a carer and you're in a court, you know, you're going to have legal people coming at you wanting to tie down specific details. So, for example, I had a child in a group that I was running for children adjusting to parent separation and divorce. And the father was more rational, more available, and the mother was manic depressive. So this poor child had the embarrassment of his mother bursting into school, yelling at teachers, um, and just being very embarrassed because he had this kind of incredible experience of emotional deprivation, of very unavailable, emotionally unavailable parents. That often leads to rage. So when children have that and they're feeling that rage, they often bully or they are bullied. So he was in a boarding school where he was often bullied. So he'd like be hung on a coat peg just to hang there, and just really humiliating stuff. And then the sort of cutoff point for me was when he came to the group and he told me how his mother had made him eat the soil and a plant because he didn't eat his spaghetti. That was just like the last straw for me. So then I got a hold of the father. It was a whole court case. And in that court case, you know, the advocate would ask, or the opposing advocate would ask things like, you know, did you speak to the mother as much as you did to the father? You know, trying to kind of trip you up. And I just said, the mother was not in a mental state able to answer these questions, and the father was. So yes, I spoke to him more often than the mother, you know. So sometimes I would be told, please answer the question. And I'd say, but that's not the right question. So, you know, you have to be motivated from within of the cause that you're fighting for, and not allow all the legal stuff to trip you up. So I believe that if you see people in that kind of situation and you have a passion for it, don't stop. You know, go to whatever ends it takes to make sure you can do as much as what you can do. But in reality, there will be times when you can't do things, and it's just horrible. Horrible to be aware of it and not to be able to make it different. Then we as Christians have our faith, and we know God is a really powerful intervener. He's a great healer, and that the prayers of a righteous person changes much. So we still have that hope.
Okay. Thank you so much for answering that question. How do you handle work life? How do you balance it? I know your kids are grown now, right?
Yeah, now it's easy.
Now how did you
Easier,
I
except
will make the question, how did you used to manage work and life? How did you balance it?
well, I was very fortunate to work for myself, and I think that was the easiest thing, because when you work for yourself, you can make your own time slots, and you can shift a time slot if the child has an important hockey match or a debating society. So, and the other thing that really helped me is I lived close to where my children went to school. So where I was working, I could see them come and go. You know, if they came home from school, even if I was working in counseling, somebody could see them arrive. It kind of felt like we still stayed connected. I could pop out, you know, if there was like a massive scream and somebody had knocked their head on the door. I could say to my clients, sorry, that is emergency call. I've got to go. Just hold on a minute. And I could rush out and deal with whatever was going on. So that definitely helped. But it's not always easy, you know, to spread your time around between children and clients, because you only have a certain amount of emotional energy. So I think taking time for yourself, especially I used to find what helped, especially is prepare myself for the day. So try and be awake before everybody else. And even though I might be exhausted, it helped me be less exhausted in a way, knowing that I was calm in myself, I was in the right place with God, I'd done my journaling, I was kind of at peace within myself. That definitely made the day start a lot better and helped me. The other thing that somebody taught me, which you might find helpful, is the day before you go to bed at night, write down all the things that you want to get done the next day. Just write them down. Then go back over that list and give them an A if they have to be done, a B if you'd like them to be done, but it's not going to be critical if they're not done, and C if it's okay if it doesn't get done tomorrow. And then go back to your A's, 1, 2, 3, list them. B, 1, 2, 3, C, 1, 2, 3. And then start your day looking at that list. Because if you don't, you start your day just responding to whatever comes at you. And sometimes some of the most important things don't get done.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. What suggestions do you have for someone like me that is interested in this field?
Okay, so maybe I need to ask you a couple of questions, because you said you wanted to go back to Africa and start some kind of center, it sounded like.
Counseling. Once I have a lot of experience from here. Okay. I would like to, I'm originally from Ghana, so I would like to go back there. Okay. And back in Ghana, I'm not sure if you're familiar, we don't have any age limit or age set day for drinking. So I would like to really go into addiction once I'm done with, my clinical hours. I have worked here for a while to gain much more experience that I need to be comfortable with handling something myself. I would like to open a center over there for drug addiction, because many young people such as myself, when I was young, 12, 10 years, my family could send me into the shop to go buy alcohol, and best believe I tasted some before taking it back. Those kind of things, it leads to early, addiction without them knowing. So, because prematurely trying alcohols and drugs, just trying it can cause a lot of troubles on its own. Not everybody that tries it goes into addiction, but most often it leads into addiction. So I would like to open something out there to tackle drug addiction out there. Okay. That's what I'm interested in the near future. I'd say about 10, 15 years from now, because I still need to, work a little bit under other people to learn and gain more experience and know the ins and out of the business first before I can move out there on my own or anywhere else on my own.
Okay. I think that's a wise idea, to get as much as experience and grow, especially grow within yourself as much as possible before you go out on your own. My belief is that the way in which society runs, the way in which we relate to nature, the way in which we are parented, often leaves us feeling filled up emotionally, or leaves us feeling emotionally deprived along a continuum. When people feel emotionally deprived, two things happen. One is they are more prone to addictions, and the other is they are more full of rage. So I think always the focus is on, first of all, because you can't do this for other people if you don't know how to do it for yourself. First of all, know how to fill your cup emotionally. Know how to nurture yourself, how to value yourself, how to know who you are, what you like, what you don't like. And then you're in a much better position to do that for other people. And when it comes to addiction, you definitely need to work one-on-one with people at least twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. But I think what works well with addiction is individual work and group therapy. So I don't know I don't know if you would do both. You know, it would probably be better if somebody does individual work and then you work together with a colleague who does the group work, but the two of you work very much hand in hand with what's going on with each particular client. So with addiction, there are two very important things. I suppose it goes back to what's really important with parenting, really. So with addiction, it's very important to fill someone up emotionally so that they really feel loved, they really feel, because people can come from really good homes where parents are available, but they don't feel loved. You know, people feel loved when people get them. When people know, okay, you're feeling sad. Oh no, that must have been so embarrassing. You know, when you really get them, that's when people feel really loved, held, nurtured, really loved. So for people to be in that kind of parenting therapy, it really starts filling their tank so that they don't need to look for a quick fix. You know, because alcohol, sex, you know, all those kind of things are a quick fix for something that's actually a long-term need. And then it's important to set very firm limits, especially with addiction, because, you know, they can steal, it can be just really challenging. So very strict limits and very clear consequences if those limits are violated. So, and it's best to work together, work those limits together with the family and with the person. So, for example, with the family and the person, they'd have to hear. You know, often people aren't in the space, addictive people aren't in the space. So you'd have to choose the right timing for this. But when they are in the right space to really want to transform, they really have to hear how the impact that they've had. So based on that, you know, especially if they're going to go back into the family or they're still living in the family, they have to be, the family and them have to work very carefully together as to what those limits are, and then those limits have to be kept. If the person goes away to an alcohol or a drug addiction center, you know, often that can be helpful depending on where it is. I would often recommend that it's in nature because there's so much nurturing that comes from nature. I think you must know that as a Ghanaian. So, I was in Cape Town once and I was working with a woman who said she was called to be a Sangoma, but she was seeing really powerful things like, you know, the clouds, the sun would change this and the clouds would do that. And she had a 13-year-old son who was being significantly impacted by this. So I thought, well, let me just get to the bottom of this. For me, it was it came from an emotional place, but let me just check out the Sangoma aspect. So I met with her and a Sangoma, a special tradition. She threw the bones, and basically the Sangoma and I came to the same conclusion. But this was an emotional need, and she wasn't actually being called to be a Sangoma. But one of the things the Sangoma said to me, which I'll always remember, she said, in the past, before we had institutions, if people were mentally unstable, they would walk into the bush on their own, and they would come back when they were feeling more stable. So basically going into a system that's harmonious, that's well connected, is a very balancing thing. So for me, to have an addiction center, it would really help if it was in a wilderness place or in a nature place. But then I find, and I'm telling you all this because this is your specific area of interest, I feel that a big gap between addiction centers and reconnecting into the family and reconnecting back into life. It's almost like you clean this fish and you put it back into muddy water. So you have to you have to have a place of renegotiation between those two systems. So for me, again, the best place to do that is in nature. Take people off on a couple of days camping, or in a reasonably priced place, and have some sessions together. So everybody's on the same level playing. They're all in the same. They're not at home. They're not at the institution. And negotiate. What's it going to be like to come back? What do they feel like? What are their expectations? What do they want? What do they don't want? What's going to happen if this X, Y, and Z happens? And what is the person coming back? What do they need? What kind of support? What kind of limits? So I feel like a lot of people go back into addiction because that negotiation doesn't happen. Anyway, so that's all my blab on.
No, it was interesting talking to you. Will it be okay to still keep in touch with you from time to time?
Of course, of course.
Yeah. And then also, do you have a practice here?
I do. So if you want to be in therapy with me as your own way of growing, I'd be happy to do that for you. If you're working with somebody and you want my supervision, I'd be happy. So I'm open to either of those.
Okay. I'm not yet there, but I think last year I completed my associate. It's actually in applied science, chemical dependency.
Okay.
And I was supposed to do 300 hours of practicum. I looked everywhere, and the base would not allow me to do it, but it didn't come to mind to use you. So they just allowed me to do online groups, Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, just to fill up that 300-hour with the practicum. Okay. But it will be nice to actually, get my own growth. Sure. And I'm thinking, I don't know what UMGC does with the practicums, how they do it, but I'm thinking when I get there, I'll probably, but from time to time, if you can mentor me, that would be really great. I'll really appreciate it. You have a lot of experience under your belt, and I would really like to learn.
I do, and I'd really love to pass it on. So if I can contribute in any way, you just let me know.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure, Louise. It's been lovely chatting to you. Lovely to meet you. Lovely to know your vision. And I'll be praying that all of that really does unfold and happen.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me your time.
Pleasure. We'll see you around.
See you around. Thank you.
Bye. Okay. Bye.